Hey everyone, it's the Diplomat, and today we're going to actually go through the transcript of the recent interview with Chris Watts at the jail that he's in, which is redacted throughout the report. But thank you to one of our listeners, Ren, who made that suggestion today. And I realized I had the transcript available so I could go through it for you all. I know the audio was quite difficult to hear at times, so figured I would read this report to you all, and then we can get back into the regular discovery. So, on the first page we have a CBI report, description of follow-up interview with Christopher Watts at the redacted location. And I will say redacted location anytime they refer to that prison. It was on February 18th at 8 a.m., ending at 4 p.m. the same day. Reporting law enforcement officer Tammy Lee. And subject number 1, arrested subject Christopher Lee Watts, and it has all his bio information there. The next page is blank, and we will go into the main body of the report. Action taken. On February 18th, 2019, at approximately 7:45 a.m., I, Agent Tammy Lee, along with FBI Special Agent Graham Coder and FPD Detective Dave Baumhover, arrived at the redacted location. The purpose for our visit to the redacted location was to interview Christopher Watts concerning the murder of his pregnant wife, Shannon, and their 2 young daughters, Bella, age 4, and Celeste, CC, age 3, in August of 2018. In addition, information was provided during the investigation to suggest Watts may have had additional affairs during his marriage to Shannon with a male named Trent and a female named Amanda. Watts was unable to be interviewed about Trent and Amanda prior to being moved out of state by the Colorado Department of Corrections. Upon arrival to the prison, we were escorted into a large open room which the staff referred to as the computer room. The room contained empty cubicles with chairs, no computers, which lined the walls. We activated our covert digital recording devices and also used several covert video recording devices. Watts was brought into the room a short time later, and we asked him if he remembered us. Watts looked puzzled for a brief second, and then indicated he recalled who we were. We asked Watts how he was doing, and he said, "Good," and asked how we were doing. Watts said he did not expect to see us. S.A. Coder initiated the interview with Watts and explained we were not there to speak with him about an open investigation. S.A. Coder explained to Watts that his life and situation was unique and we wanted to fully understand what happened. S.A. Coder asked Watts if he was available to speak with us, and he answered, "Definitely." S.A. Coder told Watts if there was something he didn't want to talk about, that was okay. S.A. Coder told Watts to tell us if he needed to take a break at any point. Watts explained he enjoyed being in the redacted location prison much more than the Weld County Jail in Colorado. Watts said when he was in jail in Colorado, other inmates would constantly yell at him from their cells, giving him advice on how he could kill himself in his cell and what the other inmates would do to him given the chance. Watts said everyone in the jail knew him and why he was there. Watts explained the jail had to lock down all of the inmates just for him to walk down the hallway. Watts said he never actually saw any other inmates in the Weld County Jail, but he could hear them yell at him. Watts said he has been able to call his father, mother, and sister since he's been incarcerated. Watts said he wasn't sure what his parents were going to say at his sentencing hearing in Colorado and didn't expect them to be present since they just had returned to North Carolina. S.A. Coder asked Watts if we could start to ask him questions, and Watts said, "Go ahead." S.A. Coder asked Watts if he knew the case was a national story, and Watts said he learned it was after his attorney told him there were people from Australia asking about his case. Watts said he received numerous letters with no return addresses, but he was only allowed to read them and could not keep the letters in his cell. Watts said there was a person who lived in Broomfield, Colorado, who wrote him 4 times a week and wanted to come and visit him. Watts said he also had people write to him that told him he was a monster. With regards to Trent, S.A. Coder explained the investigation revealed numerous people who claimed to have known, dated, or had sexual relations with Watts. S.A. Coder asked Watts if he had heard about the people claiming to have had affairs with him, and he said yes. Watts said his attorney, John, told him a male from Wyoming named Trent claimed to have had an affair with him. S.A. Coder explained Bolt's claims, and Watts denied knowing or having a relationship with Trent. Watts said he was shown a picture of Trent by his attorney and did not recognize him. Watts claimed he had never been to Wyoming and indicated he has never had any gay experiences or interests in the past. Watts said Trent claimed to have met him on an application called WhatsApp, and he, Watts, had never heard of it before. With regard to Amanda, Detective Baumhover asked Watts about Amanda. Watts said he didn't know Amanda. Detective Baumhover showed Watts a picture of her driver's license photo on his cell phone. Watts advised it was the same photograph shown to him by his attorney. Watts said his attorney explained Amanda claimed to have had a rendezvous in a Chick-fil-A parking lot. Watts said he had only been to one Chick-fil-A in Colorado, and it was located in Broomfield off Highway 7. We asked Watts if he wanted to see Trent and Amanda charged with a crime if it was warranted, and he said no. Watts said there are always people who take advantage of situations, and they need to look into themselves to figure out why they did it, meaning Trent and Amanda. Watts said he did not believe charging them with a crime would do anyone any good. With regards to Watts's relationship with his mistress, S.A. Coder asked Watts if he felt comfortable telling us if he had affairs with other people, and Watts said yes. Watts told us he only had an affair with his mistress. S.A. Coder asked Watts if he ever had any one-night stands, and he said no. Around June 1st, 2018, he met his mistress at work, Anna Darko. He had a gas meter that didn't work and took it to her to have it fixed. He and his mistress ran into each other a few times in the office and would chat about work. Around the fourth time meeting her, he mentioned we moved from North Carolina. The mistress asked him what he meant by we, and he took out his cell phone and showed her a picture of his daughters. She also saw a picture of Shannon on his lock screen. The mistress knew he was married and had children. He knew she lied and said she didn't know he was married. The mistress was trying to, quote-unquote, save face. He has not talked to the mistress since his arrest. He hopes she hasn't written to him in a different alias that he does not recognize. He didn't wear a wedding ring at work because it was getting sized since it was too big after he lost weight and it kept falling off. The mistress texted him one day when he was working in the field, and their text messages to each other continued. One day, he and his mistress's text messages, quote-unquote, kinda went to a different level. His mistress talked about them meeting up after he returned from a trip with Shannon to San Diego. He went to San Diego from June 22nd to 26th, 2018. After he returned home from San Diego, he and his mistress met at a park in Thornton, Colorado. He and she continued to see each other almost the entire month of July 2018. He initially thought his relationship with his mistress was just flirting at work. He wished he would have worked out more in the field, so he never got close to her. When he became a field coordinator, he was forced to spend more time in the office, and he would constantly run into his mistress. He wished he could talk to her one last time to apologize to her about what happened and what she went through. He didn't know if she had received counseling or if she had to leave the state due to publicity of the case. His mistress refused to speak to his attorney. He hoped she found normalcy because Anna Darko was her dream job. With regard to if he loved her, quote-unquote, I felt like it was true. He felt like his mistress pursued him, which was unusual for him. He felt, quote-unquote, more in control when he was with her because she would ask his opinion on things and what he wanted to do. He felt like he could be himself around her, unlike Shannon. The first time he and his mistress went out, they went to a movie at the Orchard off 144th. He asked his mistress if she wanted to see a movie, and she agreed. The movie was sold out, and they walked around for 2 hours and talked. His mistress wanted to go to a Shelby car museum in Boulder, which he enjoyed. He and his mistress went to a drag race at Bandamere Speedway, which reminded him of his childhood. He and his mistress went camping in the Sand Dunes National Park, which he always wanted to do. Every time he opened up his phone and saw pictures of his wife and children, he questioned what he was doing with his mistress. Every time he was with her, he felt like he didn't think, and quote-unquote, there was a blinder in my face. He has pictures of his wife and daughters in his prison cell, and he talks to them every morning and every night. He has a book in his cell, which was the same book he used to read to Celeste. He reads the book to his daughters, along with some scripture every night. He wished it never happened, and he never had a blinder over his eyes and could have seen what was going on. He stayed at his mistress's house almost every night his wife and daughters were in North Carolina. He felt like he didn't have time at home to think about his marriage when Shanann and the girls were out of state. He went home after work to work out, eat dinner, and then would go over her house. He slept over her house almost the entire month of July. Being away from home allowed him to not think about being a father and husband because he wasn't surrounded by reminders of his family. He wished he had met her at work and kept it as a work relationship only. Quote unquote, it feels like a roller coaster ride that I just kept punching a ticket on and never could get off. His mistress wanted to have sex all the time. He never had to worry about saying something stupid around her and never had to plan what he was going to say when he was with her. His mistress asked him if he had ever strayed away before, and he told her no. He told his mistress that it felt like she had a leash on him and she was able to tug him away from Shanann. With regards to Watts's relationship with Shanann, Watts explained his first date with Shanann. Shanann said he wasn't her type. Watts said he always had to pursue Shanann and always helped organize her medications inside her pill box. Watts said he went to Shanann's colonoscopy a few months after they got together, and she told him she knew he was a keeper after he went. His mother was always hesitant about Shanann. He was the baby of the family and never had a girlfriend in high school. He moved out of the house after high school graduation, 18 years old, and never came back. His sister always moved in back and forth with their parents. He met Shanann when he was 25 years old. The longest relationship he had before Shanann was approximately 6 months. He is more reserved and quote-unquote goes with the flow. Shanann made most of the decisions in the house. With regard to what happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, Shanann arrived home around 2 a.m. and he felt her get into bed. He felt Shanann, quote-unquote, stirring around in bed, and he felt like she knew he was having an affair. He had used his credit card when he went out to dinner with his mistress because he didn't have another Anadarko gift card and couldn't ask his mistress to pay. Shanann started rubbing her hand on his leg or chest, and they had sexual intercourse. Watts said he and Shanann had sexual intercourse at approximately 2:30 a.m. He and Shanann had sex in the missionary position. He felt like sex with Shanann was more of a test, in quotes. He felt, in quotes, strange when he had sex with Shanann and questioned who he was and who he had become. Having sex with Shanann may have been a quote-unquote trigger point, or like you hit the push button on a bomb and it just blows up. He and Shanann fell asleep after they had sex. When he woke up that morning, he got ready for work and then returned to the bed and woke Shanann up to talk. Shanann was sleeping face down and rolled over onto her back to talk to him. He felt like he had something to say to Shanann. He straddled Shanann on the bed around her waist. He believed Shanann initially thought he wanted to have sex with her again since he was on top of her. Shanann told him he was hurting the baby. He and Shanann talked for approximately 15 to 20 minutes with him straddling on top of her. He was concerned Shanann knew about his affair and she and the kids wouldn't be there when he got home from work that evening. He felt like either Shanann would take the kids away from the house or would lock him out when he tried to come home after work. He asked Shanann if they could cancel their couple's trip to Aspen. He asked Shanann if they could move to Brighton, Colorado, so they could get away from their house. He felt like going out on Saturday evening with his mistress and using their credit card was going to be, quote-unquote, the last straw. Shanann told him she knew there was someone else and cried. He denied having an affair. In quotes, I just felt guilty, more guilty than ever before. He told Shanann he didn't think their marriage was going to work. He did not feel like he and Shanann were compatible with each other. Quote, in quotes, anything that's new, referring to his relationship with his mistress, always feels better than the old. He always felt nervous around Shanann and never felt like he could be himself. Shanann asked him, in quotes, what about last night? Shanann hadn't taken off her bra and didn't wash her face before she got into bed, so she had mascara running down her face. He and Shanann's conversation lasted less than 30 minutes. Shanann told him to get off of her and that she knew he had someone else. He couldn't bring himself to tell her about his mistress. He told Shanann he didn't love her, and Shanann said, in quotes, you're never going to see the kids again. You're never going to see them again. Get off me. Don't hurt the baby. End quote. He immediately put both of his hands around Shanann's neck and strangled her. In quotes, every time I think about it, I'm just like, did I know I was going to do that? Referring to strangling Shanann. Before I got on top of her? End quotes. Another quote. Like the whole, everything that happened that morning, I don't know, like I try to go back in my head. I'm just like, I didn't want to do this, but I did it. Everything just kind of like, it just felt like it was, I don't even want to say it felt like I had to. It just felt like there was already something in my mind that was implanted that I was going to do it, and when I woke up that morning, it was going to happen, and I had no control over it. End quote. At the sentencing, he heard the prosecutor said it takes 2 to 4 minutes to strangle someone to death, so, in quotes, why couldn't I just let go? He doesn't want to know what Shanann saw when she looked back at him while he was strangling her. Watts denied covering Shanann's head or face with anything when he strangled her. Shanann never fought back or screamed. He does not know why Shanann didn't fight back. He believes Shanann may have been praying. He read the Bible that said, in quotes, forgive these people, for they do not know what they do, end quote. And maybe Shanann was saying that in her head at the time. When he was asked to take off his shirt so he could check for defensive wounds, he knew immediately he didn't have any because Shanann never fought back. He does not recall Shanann's arm being pinned down by his knees. In quotes, I feel like in the back of my head that was going to happen. And just like at the end of the conversation, it was just like, that's what happened. I just wished I could have let go. End quote. Time seemed to stand still, and he saw his life was disappearing before his eyes, but he couldn't let go. In quotes, it was like picturing someone around you, holding your hands, holding you and keeping you from letting go. End quote. He felt like he was in a rage and, in quotes, snapped. His attorney mentioned the crime of strangulation was, in quotes, passionate, and he does understand how that could be passionate. That morning, in quotes, it was a new type of fight. There was emotion at first, but it was more anger than anything else because there was no love there. In quotes, I think it was more anger from me and more like desperation from her. End quote. Shanann knew something wasn't right and wanted to fix it. After Shanann was, in quotes, gone, he didn't know what was happening and felt like it was, in quotes, traumatic event. He was shaking and didn't know what had happened. He didn't know what to do and didn't know what he had done. He wasn't in the right state of mind and wasn't in control of his thoughts or actions. People asked him why he didn't call 911, but no one knows what they would do in the same situation. After Shanann was dead, Bella walked into their bedroom holding her blanket and asked what was wrong with Mommy. He believed Bella may have been woken up by the noise. He told Bella, in quotes, Mommy don't feel good. End quote. Bella thought Shanann was sleeping. He wrapped Shanann face down in the bedsheet, which was recovered at the oil site. Shanann was still wearing her shirt, bra, and underwear she had on when she got into bed. He tried to carry Shanann down the stairs and lost his grip and ended up having to pull her down the stairs. Bella watched him drag Shanann down the stairs and began to cry and said, in quotes, "What's wrong with Mommy?" End quote. He told Bella again that her mommy didn't feel good. Bella is a smart girl and knew what was going on. Bella never touched Shanann or tried to wake her up. Bella followed him down the stairs. He backed his pickup into the driveway and put Shanann into the back seat of his truck on the floorboard. When he returned inside, Celeste was in her room and was starting to get out of her bed. He believed the noise of Shanann's feet hitting the stairs as he dragged her down the stairs may have woken up Celeste. Bella and Celeste were light sleepers. Bella and Celeste were walking around the house. Every time he sees pictures of Bella and Celeste, he doesn't understand how it all could have happened. Being a dad was the best part of his life, and he took it all away. He felt like someone else had control over him that day, and he wasn't able to fight back. When the prosecutor said Bella bit her tongue repeatedly, he wanted to bang his head up against the wall. At that point, he put his lunchbox in the truck and then put both Bella and Celeste in the back of his truck on the bench seat. Shanann was lying on the floorboard. Bella asked in quotes, "Is Mommy okay?" He told Bella and Celeste that Mommy would be fine. Bella and Celeste each had a blanket with them, and Celeste had a stuffed animal, barking dog. He put a gas can in the back of his truck and felt like he could get rid of himself at the same time. He didn't feel like he deserved to live or be on this earth after what had happened. After everything happened, he considered taking his own life as well. He did not commit suicide because he felt like if he did it out at the oil site, he may have ended up hurting more people than just himself. He knew there were other people in the area and didn't want something to catch fire or blow up. He does not own any weapons, but nothing seemed right that morning. As he drove to the oil site with Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, he was nervous, shaking, and didn't know what was going to happen. He knew at that moment that his life was completely changed. He has tried to picture the long ride out to the oil site and wondered if he could have saved his girl's life. He wasn't thinking during the entire drive. He has read books about how dads could never hurt their children, and he has wondered, in quotes, "Was I even a dad at one point? I don't know," end quote. He had wanted his whole life to be a dad, and nothing made sense, including the oil tank. During the ride, the girls were dozing on and off, held each other, and laid in each other's laps. During the ride, Bella said, in quotes, "Daddy, it smells." When he got to the oil site, he took Shanann out of the back of the truck and pulled her over and laid her on the ground near where she was ultimately buried. Bella and Celeste were still sitting in the back of the truck as he removed Shanann. Bella and Celeste asked him, in quotes, "What are you doing to Mommy?" end quote. He doesn't recall what he told them. He returned to the truck and, in quotes, Cece was first. Celeste had a blue Yankees blanket and he put it over her head. He strangled Celeste in the back seat. He put his hand over Celeste's mouth and nose over the blanket and his other hand around the front of Celeste's neck. Bella was seated right beside Celeste as he strangled her, but Bella didn't say anything. He had no idea how long it took to smother Celeste because he had no concept of time. With regard to what he was thinking at the time, in quotes, "I wasn't. If I was thinking, this wouldn't have happened, or any partial hint of what I feel for those girls and what I feel for my wife, then none of this would have happened, so I wasn't thinking," end quote. After Celeste died, he took Celeste out of the truck, walked her up to the oil tank, opened the hatch, and dropped her inside feet first. He believed it was tight when he put Celeste through the hatch on the oil tank. He did not have to hit Celeste into the tank, but may have had to manipulate her to get her inside. He closed the hatch on the oil tank and returned to his truck. When he got in the truck, Bella asked him, in quotes, "What happened to Cece?" Bella asked him in her soft voice, in quotes, "Is this same thing going to happen to me as Cece?" end quote. He is not sure if he told Bella, yes, like a horrible person. He then put the same Yankees blanket over Bella's head and, in quotes, did the same thing, end quote. Bella said, in quotes, "Daddy, no," end quote, and it was the last words she spoke. He put his hand over Bella's nose and mouth, over the blanket, and his other hand around the front of her neck, with regard to Bella's injuries in her mouth. Bella's head was twisting back and forth under the blanket while he strangled her. He could hear Bella in quotes, grunt as she tried to breathe. He noticed a couple of spots over Bella's eye when he picked her up. He walked Bella up to a separate oil tank, opened the hatch, and dropped her inside, feet first. Bella seemed harder to get into the tank than Celeste, but he just had to manipulate her to get her inside. He does not know why he put Bella and Celeste in separate oil tanks. Bella and Celeste were not alive when he put them into the oil tanks. After he put Bella into the oil tank, he returned to where Shanann was located and started to clear away some weeds with his rake. The rake broke when he used it, removing weeds, and he left part of it out at the site. He does not believe he ever thought about going back for the broken part of his rake. He dug a hole with his shovel and put Shanann inside. Shanann was not bleeding or cut when he buried her. He recalled Shanann's eyes were bloodshot. Shanann had not partially given birth when he buried her in the ground. Shanann was wearing a shirt and blue-colored underwear. Every time he closes his eyes, he hears Bella say, in quotes, "Daddy, no," end quote. He hears it every day. Just thinking about the oil tank makes him want to throw up. Frank, Shanann's father, said at his sentencing that he was trying to separate everyone, and that was not true. He felt like someone else was in control of what he was doing. He did not consider the fact that it may have helped with detection by putting the girls in separate oil tanks. He didn't consider putting the girls with Shanann because everything happened so fast and, in quotes, "I had no time to really have a thought that was my own," end quote. He didn't purposefully try to separate any of them. With regard to the trash bags found at the oil tank site, he didn't want his girls looking at Shanann in the back seat of his truck, so he placed one trash bag on her feet and the other around her head. The girls didn't know what was going on. After the murders, the Yankees blanket was still in his truck and he threw it away. He stopped by a construction dumpster in his neighborhood and threw away his clothes and the Yankees blanket on his way home from work on Monday. He keeps extra boots and clothes in his work truck, which he changed into after the murders. He felt like taking Celeste and Bella's lives was caused by an anger with Shanann that he took out on everyone in front of him that morning. He had never been angry before, and in quotes, and this was like the epitome of being angry, end quote. He had rage and lost his mind. He was angry with Shanann over separating him from his family. When he and Shanann got married, he told his family he didn't need them anymore because he had Shanann. He cussed his mother out and did things to his family he never thought he would do. He is not sure if Shanann coached him or not, referring to how Watts treated his family. He was angry since July 2018 when Shanann told him his parents could never see their granddaughters again. In quotes, "I don't know if that had something to do with it. That something inside me just triggered it, and then it just, like, all that pent up from the wedding and everything, it's like a long fuse that finally just went to its end," end quote. His mother and Shanann never got along after he proposed, 2012. His mother and Shanann never agreed on anything. His mother possibly thought Shanann wasn't good enough. His mother always thought Shanann was hiding something from her past from him. His mother and sister didn't like Shanann and felt like Shanann took him away from them and moved him out to Colorado. His grandmother was the only one who came to his wedding. He danced with his grandmother and his friend's mother during the groom's dance at his wedding. He would never have thought his marriage and relationship to Shanann was bad if he hadn't met his mistress. He looks outside every day and wonders what he could have been doing with his kids. In quotes, "Right now I'd have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and more than likely a 1-month-old son, and a beautiful wife, and right now it's just me," end quote. With regard to finding out Shanann was pregnant with Nichol, Shanann was pregnant with Nichol within 2 weeks of trying. He was surprised and scared when he found out Shanann was pregnant. He may have not looked excited about the pregnancy because he may have felt guilty about talking to his mistress at work. There were never any incidents of domestic violence between he and Shanann during their relationship. Shanann was the dominant person who always took control of everything. He always just went with the flow and always wanted to be in the back row. He never felt belittled by Shanann. He was the introvert, and Shanann took control of most situations. He hated being in videos, but he went along with it because it was for Shanann's business. He couldn't tell Shanann he didn't want to be in the videos because it would have made her mad. Shanann was a good salesperson and could have sold everything we were wearing back to us without us knowing. He hated being, in quotes, out there for everyone to see and was against doing their gender reveal on Facebook Live. With regard to what Watts planned to do about his missing family, he had no idea what he was going to do. He didn't understand how he was able to act normal around his coworkers. His plan was not well thought out and not a, in quotes, criminal minds type of thing. With regard to how Watts felt when he wore Thrive patches, when he put on the Duo Burn patches, his Apple Watch would show he was exercising all day because of his increased heart rate. When he wore the Duo Burn patches, it felt like he was working out all day. The mistress told him he would sometimes fall asleep on her couch in the middle of a conversation and then would wake up and finish what he was saying. Watts indicated it may have been related to insomnia. He felt different on the Duo Burn patches than when he wore any other Thrive patch. The Duo Burn patches made him feel like he could go, in quotes, longer and longer each day. He only slept approximately 3 hours each night. Looking back, he realized God gave him plenty of opportunities for him to get out, referring to getting out of his relationship with the mistress. His friend Jeremy asked him to go to a Broncos game with him on Saturday, August 11th evening, and he, Watts, said no. He should have gone with Jeremy and told his mistress he couldn't find a babysitter. Being away from his mistress might have caused a light switch to go off in his head. If he would have gone to the Broncos game, it may have put him on, in quotes, a different trajectory. He wished now that he and Shanann only went to North Carolina for a week and Shanann wasn't gone for 5 weeks straight. When the incident with Celeste and the nut allergy occurred at his parents', which he referred to as Nutgate, he should have stopped everything with his mistress and concentrated on fixing the relationship with Shanann and his family. Shanann and his parents got into a serious argument over the nut incident, and his nephew told Bella to hide behind the curtain because he didn't think her mom, Shanann, would let her ever come back again. Celeste celebrated her birthday in North Carolina a few days after July 17th, and his parents did not attend after Shanann made a post of Facebook about allergies. Shanann said the post wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but Shanann, in quotes, had a method to the madness, end quote. Shanann was convinced Watts's mother tried to kill their daughter by putting nuts in front of Celeste. His mother felt like Celeste's allergy was not serious. After the incident with the nut allergy and Celeste, he didn't speak to his parents until August 6th. His parents said they weren't sure they could ever forgive Shanann. His parents asked him if he had someone else because they saw him texting someone the entire time he was at their house in North Carolina. Shanann told him, Chris, he wasn't allowed to call or talk to his parents. His dad was his hero, and he felt like he lost him because he wasn't able to talk to him for 3 weeks. His father took the entire week off when they were in North Carolina, but Shanann booked them for 5 days at the beach instead. With regard to what Watts and his mistress talked about regarding their future together, his mistress told him she would help him find an affordable apartment around Brighton or Fort Lupton. His mistress did not want him to move in with her. It would have been too soon to move in with her because they had only dated for about a month. Her apartment was her shield or her safe place and was the reason she never liked people to come over. The mistress let him come over because her dog liked him and she felt like he belonged there. Shanann always checked his cell phone, so he communicated with his mistress on his work phone. He used a secret calculator app on his personal cell phone to store his and his mistress's pictures. He deleted his Facebook account on August 8, 2018, after his mistress told him she told her friends about him. He was afraid his mistress's friends would try to look him up on Facebook and would see his wife was pregnant. With regard to if he and his mistress ever fought, they never fought, but he had to calm his mistress down a few times. She got upset when she realized she would always be, in quotes, the other person, end quote, and he, Watts, would always put his wife first. The first incident where she realized he put his wife first was when he left her house on July 4th, 2018. He told his mistress just because he had to leave didn't mean she needed to take a step back. His mistress told him she thought it was better they didn't see each other the rest of the day on July 4th. She ended up asking him to come over after she returned from a baseball game, and he went to her house. His mistress set up a couple of dates on her eHarmony app, and the men never showed up. He didn't know she was dating other people until a few weeks later. She thought he was different because he would fix things around her apartment for her, which no one had done for her in the past. The mistress's friend, Jim, was her friend for a long time and worked in the oil field. With regard to the selling of his and Shanann's house, around the first week of August 2018, Shanann sent an email to Anne about selling their house. Anne recommended they get pre-approved for another house before they sold their house. He and Shanann talked about buying a home in Brighton, Colorado, so they could stay in the Adams 12 school district. He and Shanann had a lot of stress during their marriage, which included Shanann's parents living with them for 16 months and not having much alone time. He never thought he and Shanann would have to file for bankruptcy. Most of the bankruptcy dealt with credit card debt from their wedding. They had a lot of doctor bills from the girls always being sick. They were behind on their mortgage payments. Shanann was sending checks for their HOA payment to the wrong address for an entire year. He didn't have access to their bank account on his cell phone and never asked Shanann to see their account. Ever since he sold his four-wheeler for less than what he owed on it, Shanann wouldn't let him do anything with their finances. When he worked for Longmont Ford, he would just bring Shanann his paycheck. With regard to Watts calling the school the morning after the murders, he was, in quotes, freaking out, end quote, about what he had just done. It was stupid to call the school or Anne. It made sense they were suspicious about him because he probably sounded eccentric on the phone. With regard to why Watts pled guilty, in quotes, I didn't want anybody else. I didn't want them to go through this for 2 to 4 years. I didn't want my attorneys to lie for me for 2 to 4 years. They would have done anything I told them to do. I don't see how they can do that. Like, that's what attorneys do. Like, they take their defendant and they say, hey, like, what happened? Okay, we'll go with that story. End quote. A few weeks after his arrest, he told his attorneys the truth about everything that had happened. His attorneys asked him if he was ever offered a plea to plead guilty, would he take it? He said he would plead guilty in order to end it all. His attorneys asked him about 100 times if he was sure he wanted to take the plea deal. Before he walked into the courtroom, his attorneys asked him again if he was sure he wanted to take the plea deal. His attorneys never told him he had to take the plea deal, and they had a lot of creative motions to file and weren't, in quotes, ready to fight. He told his attorney he didn't want him to fight for something where the story wasn't true, because it would only have gotten worse for everyone. He does not regret taking a plea deal, but he never thought he'd be in prison for the rest of his life. He didn't want for everyone to have to relive the case every day. He told his parents the night before he pled guilty that he was pleading guilty for a reason. His parents had received correspondence from people all over the world who told them the Thrive Patch wasn't FDA approved and could alter someone's mind. His parents still believed he was, in quotes, railroaded, and felt pressured to plead guilty. He does not feel he was pressured because his defense team asked him plenty of times. His parents talked to him about using the defense of CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, for being in an emotionally abusive relationship. He could relate to some of the information, but it doesn't make up for what happened. When he talks to his parents on the phone, they believe there is a chance he could get out of prison. On his parents' bad days, they tell him he should fight it. His mother, quote-unquote, loses it a lot on the phone. His dad always tells his mother not to talk about it with him on the phone because he, Watts, will go back to his cell and think about it all night. He plans on telling his parents the truth about what happened when they visit him in April-May. His parents sold his toolbox so they could afford their travel to the jail. In October 2018, the prosecutors went to Sandy and Frank Rusek and asked them about a possible plea deal instead of the death penalty. His defense team told him there wasn't enough evidence on certain things, and Watts told the defense team it needed to end. He felt like his attorneys were fair and were similar to guidance counselors. He felt like he was in charge of his own decisions regarding his case. His attorneys told him he needed to show more emotion in court so he didn't look like a cold person. His attorneys told him he could look at the crime pictures, and Watts refused. He prayed for the hazmat workers and anyone else who has seen the aftermath. His attorneys told him if the case went to court, he would have to look at the pictures so he didn't have a reaction when they were shown in court. Watts asked if Sandy and Frank Rusek saw the crime scene pictures, and he was told no. He didn't want Sandy or Frank to have to see any of the pictures, hear anyone talk about what they saw, or hear anyone bash their daughter's memory. He wanted everyone to know Shanann was a loving wife and always helped everyone else. He remembered Agent Lee and Coder, came into the room after his father left and tried to get the true story from him. He wanted to bang his head against the table. He didn't want all of us, Coder, Baumhover, or Lee, to have to get on the witness stand and testify about what we saw. He didn't want everyone to have to relive what happened over and over for years. He felt like Shanann's family could start to have closure. With regard to if his decision involved not having the death penalty, when he was in his cell in the Weld County Jail, he felt like he should have died. All of the inmates would yell at him at night and would explain to him all the ways he could kill himself in his cell by drowning himself in the toilet or hanging himself. He didn't kill himself because he felt like he may have a different purpose. He prayed to God that God would move him away from Colorado. He heard there was a hit on him in Colorado. He felt like he would last a week in Colorado DOC before someone would kill him. He felt like God moved him to the new jail for a reason. With regards to if Watts thought about trying to use the defense about Shanann killing the girls at trial, he never thought about Shanann killing the girls until it was mentioned to him during the interrogation. After it was mentioned that Shanann may have killed the girls, he just, in quotes, went with it. He knew his dad was out in the lobby and his parents would probably believe Shanann was involved because they never liked Shanann. In quotes, I never thought about that story, and, that's what my attorneys were going with, end quote. 2 weeks after his arrest, he told his attorneys the truth about what happened, and they were quiet and wrote it down. His attorneys told him they wouldn't judge him and appreciated his honesty. With regard to Watts's past and childhood, he was always someone who tried to coax people down. He was in one fight in his entire life, which was in 3rd grade, and he and the other kid ripped each other's shirts and left crying. He wasn't popular but was never bullied in school. He had braces and a Jim Carrey bowl-cut haircut. He never talked to many people at school, even though people knew who he was. He never had a girlfriend in high school and always, in quotes, flew under the radar. He didn't have low self-esteem, but also didn't want to be part of a group or clique. He had a couple of friends and appreciated his close-knit relationships. His sister was always the popular one and was outgoing. He and his grandmother would sit outside the middle school, and his sister would always be the last one out of the school because she had to talk to everyone in the hallway. He was the opposite of his sister. He didn't want to be popular and just wanted to be, in quotes, a regular guy. He cannot recall anything he would have had pent up from childhood. With regard to how his father's addiction affected him, his father became addicted to a white powdery substance, possibly cocaine, after he left home. His father's addiction didn't hurt him as much as he thought it would. When he talked to his father about his addiction, his father immediately changed the subject. His father was coping with the fact that he never came back home. His mother initially believed his father was having an affair because he couldn't account for missing money. Watts has never used drugs and tried to talk to his father about why he was using drugs. He told his father he was throwing his life away. His father lost a lot of weight and his nose bled all the time. After he talked to his father stopped using drugs. He was always closer to his father than his mother. His father always came to every one of his sporting events. His father would come to his games even if he wasn't going to play. He never saw his father cry. His mother was a loving mother and gave him affection. His mother always wanted to know how he felt. If there was something wrong, he would never have told anyone and dealt with it himself." In quotes. I don't know if growing up that way kept me that way. Deal with things on your own, but then they build up so much that you can't deal with them, and they take a hold of you. You never thought, in a way, they could take a hold of you. End quote. With regard to Watts planting evidence, after he murdered Shanann, he threw her cell phone and Apple Watch on the couch. If he had planted it, he would have taken her items out to the oil tank site with him. He took off Shanann's wedding ring and put it on the counter, so it looked like she didn't want to fix their marriage and wanted a divorce. He threw the therapy book away in the trash, so it looked like she believed nothing would work in their marriage. He may have gone down to the basement to get trash bags. Motion alarm on basement door. He does not recall going downstairs to work out that morning. With regard to what he did after he went into the house the afternoon of Monday, August 13th, Watts was in the house for approximately 1 minute before he went to the front door and opened it for law enforcement. He went in through the garage door and opened the front door. He ran upstairs and pretended to look around for Shanann and the girls. Nichole's son found Shanann's cell phone. With regard to Watts looking in the passenger side of Shanann's vehicle when he entered the garage, he does not recall looking in Shanann's vehicle, but he possibly opened the passenger door because Nichol had mentioned seeing the girls' car seats. He threw the sheet to their bed away the day after the murders. When you strangle someone, sometimes they evacuate their bowels, and that occurred with Shanann and was the reason he threw away the sheet. With regards to Watts' communication with his father the morning he picked him up from the airport, it was strange when he picked up his father because he knew it was probably the last time he would see him, in quotes, on the outside. His father just wanted to talk about sports when they were in the car together. His father always tries to deflect the conversations and change the conversation when they needed to discuss something important. His father asked him if he knew where Shanann and the girls were. In quotes, "Maybe he kind of figured out something maybe happened and he just wanted to talk to me as a son." End quote. He was told his father never left during his entire polygraph and interview. If his father knew what actually happened, his father would have told him to admit what he had done. His mother was always the more aggressive one in his parents' marriage. His and Shanann's marriage seemed to mirror Shanann's mom and dad's relationship. Shanann similar to her mother, and he, Chris, was like Shanann's father. Shanann's mother always told her she would marry someone like her father. Shanann's father always liked him because he helped fix Shanann's car when they were dating. Watts has always been the one to help people, not hurt them. He never tried to change Shanann. Shanann's husband in her first marriage was more like her mother, and it didn't work. With regard to if Watts knew walking into the police department the morning of the polygraph that he would confess to what happened, he knew there was a reason he was brought back into the police department the following day. The polygraph was, in quotes, horrible. He was asked questions for 3 to 4 hours before the polygraph, and, in quotes, it's like you just break down somebody's brain to where, like, to mush, to jello. I know you guys have a job, and you have a plan, and you executed it. End quote. He knew when he was asked about what he did on Saturday night, and he had to talk about the Rockies game, it was going to be a thorough interview. In quotes, walking in there that day, just walking into that room, I knew I wasn't walking out. End quote. With regard to Watts' media interviews, he never wanted to speak with the media. He felt like the media was going to continue to knock on his door until he answered. Nichol called him and told him Fox would be at his house at 10:30 for an interview. He doesn't even want to know what he said or what he looked like on the news. Some people made it, in quotes, look worse after the fact. He ended up just lying to more and more people by talking to the media. He heard he looked like, in quotes, heartless, soulless person. With regard to if Watts spoke to his mistress after the murders, he spoke to his mistress on Monday, August 13th. He and his mistress texted and then spoke on the phone. His mistress said she believed Shanann took off with his daughters. On Tuesday, August 14th, his mistress kept asking him weird questions through text message to try and determine if it was really him. His mistress asked him what his dog's name was and what yoga studio he went to. It was possible his mistress believed Shanann had his cell phone and she was making sure. His mistress told him it was the last time he would hear from her and she was going to stay with her friend Jim. His mistress told him not to contact her, in quotes, until this is done. His mistress told him to delete everything on his cell phone. He didn't delete everything from his mistress, and he is not sure why. When he was on vacation in San Diego, he told his friend Mark about his mistress. Mark had a similar situation occur where he started dating a female who was engaged, and the female ended up cheating on him. He never completely opened up to Mark about his mistress, and wished he did because Mark may have been able to offer him some advice. With regard to his mistress being directly or indirectly involved in the murders, in quotes, she had her moments where I had to talk her like off a ledge kind of a deal, end quote. There were videos of her recording herself because she was bipolar. His father or his attorney told him about a few videos his mistress made where she was talking about being bipolar. In quotes, she would get worked up about nothing. His mistress came to his house one time on July 4th. He woke up the morning of July 4th at her house because he didn't have to work that day. When he woke up, he had 10 missed calls from Shanann. He went outside and called Shanann back, and Shanann was pissed. Shanann yelled at him and asked him where he was at. He told Shanann he was sleeping, and Shanann told him she didn't know where he was at and hung up on him. He went back inside and told his mistress he had to go home in case Shanann called back. His mistress asked him if he was going to come back, and he said no. His mistress was pissed when he left. His mistress said she felt like she was always going to be, in quotes, second fiddle. She told him she researched online if mistresses could turn into a real relationship. Around the first week of August, he told his mistress he talked to Shanann about separating, so his mistress started looking for apartments for him. She never asked him to get rid of his family. His relationship with her contributed to the murders, but she never asked him to do anything. She never knew if she wanted to have kids, but she told him she wished she could give him a son. She never knew Shanann was pregnant. It was possible his mistress saw Shanann was pregnant from Facebook, but she never mentioned it to him if she saw it. With regard to the possibility he named his son Nichol after his mistress, Shanann picked the name for their son. He wanted to spell his son's name Nico, N-E-K-O, but Shanann said no. Nico is an Italian name that Shanann always liked. He did not get to pick any of his children's name, but he told Shanann he liked them. With regard to him looking up lyrics to the Metallica song Battery, his mistress liked the song Battery and asked him what the song meant. He researched the meaning behind the lyrics and learned it referenced, in quotes, a family coinciding as a battery, end quote. He did not look up the lyrics to the song when he was driving to or from the oil site after the murders. His mistress was into different types of music, and Battery was a song she asked him about because he knew Metallica very well. With regard to how Watts was doing mentally, he didn't know he was going to this jail. When he was at DRDC, Denver Reception and Diagnostic Center, he was, in quotes, put through the ringer. He took 11 separate tests to figure out his IQ. His IQ was 135 or 140. After dinner one evening, he was told to change clothes and was put in a van and transported to this new jail. He got staffed at the prison and hopes to get a job soon. He has a female he sees at the prison who asks him how things are going and if he needs any psych meds. He has declined any and all psych medication. Most of the men in his unit are on medication. He tries to keep a low profile in the prison. With regard to what food he misses the most, he misses Bojangles, Georgia Boy's BBQ, and Shanann's cooking, spaghetti sauce and fried pizza. Shanann had her grandmother's recipe for pizza dough, and she made amazing pizza. With regard to what Watts does with all the letters he received while in jail prison. If someone writes him once, he will not write them back. He keeps most of the supportive letters, but will throw away any weird letters. There is a male who is a high school senior who wrote him, so he threw the letter away. The same male wrote him again a few weeks ago and told him he supported him. Many people, including journalists, have tried to write him to ask a lot of questions. He has responded to a few people, but they were people his parents had talked to, so he knew they were real. Many people ask him for spiritual advice. He had one female write him who was in an abusive relationship and couldn't find a relationship with God. He had never read the Bible before going to prison and has since read it cover to cover. He writes down a couple of scriptures a day for his parents. His uncle and aunt are missionaries and were amazed how mature he has become with the Bible. His gift is a great memory, so he tries to help people by memorizing scriptures. He has had other inmates write him just to ask if he could send them some scriptures. If people ask about the case, he won't write them back. With regard to if he ever thought he'd fall in love again. In quotes, "No, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not the guy that's down the street. What's his name?" And then redacted. End quote. He heard redacted name got engaged over a letter, and that is pretty insane. He heard one female sent him a letter while he was in Colorado, which included a picture of her in a bikini, and the press found it. He does not write back anyone associated with the media. The redacted news stations have asked to talk to him, and the prison has declined. He has never thought about writing a book. His parents have suggested he write down how he feels and how he has been dealing with everything. He has always had a crazy imagination ever since he was a little kid. He convinced his teacher in grade school that he went to Japan or China over the summer, which was not true. He wrote a whole story about it, and his teacher believed him. With regard to what Watts thinks of himself now, when he was incarcerated in Weld County, he didn't feel like himself. He wondered how any of his friends could say good things about him after what happened. He shouldn't take to heart what people think about him, because what God thinks about him is the only thing that matters now. He has asked God for forgiveness. In quotes, "I was hoping they could one day forgive me too." End quote. He has done some good things in his life, but he screwed up the most important thing. He hopes he can help other people with the time he has left. It's going to take a long time for the guilt to go away. People are defining him by one moment in his life. In quotes, "I never knew I could have a relationship with God like I do now. It's like the amazing grace with all of this. But I just wish nobody had to pay any kind of price for this. I know there is a purpose for everybody. I just hope I can find mine." End quote. With regard to what we could have said in order for him to have told us the truth during his interview at the Frederick Police Department. When he was in the interrogation room, he was nervous. He knew he did something wrong and knew we were going to find out. He has watched enough TV shows but never talked to a police officer in the past. He struggled with the horror of knowing what he did and trying to tell someone else about it. He didn't even want to admit to himself what he had done. He knew what he did was horrific and how much it would hurt other people. He couldn't admit to himself that he had done it, so he couldn't admit it to the police. He believed if he wasn't asked about Shanann hurting the kids, it may have come out a different way. He believed if we would have lied and told him we saw the video of the kids in the truck, he would have told us the truth. He asked to talk to his dad because he wanted to tell him he loved him and that it was probably the last time he would see him outside of a cell. He felt like the interviewers leaving the room from time to time gave him time to stew and was a successful tactic. He had never seen the picture before of his two girls, which we showed him during the interrogation. He had never seen Celeste wearing the white dress in the picture. The picture of Celeste and Bella we showed him may have come from when they were in North Carolina. Showing him pictures of the girls during the interrogation, in quotes, definitely got in my head. He didn't show emotion when we showed him the picture because he is the type of person to hold it all in and does not show emotion. At the end of the interview, we left the prison as Watts was required to eat lunch and be present during their count. We told Watts we may return after lunch to ask him additional questions, and he said okay. S.A. Coder also told Watts we may come back in a month, in a year, or even in 2 years to speak with him and to keep it in the back of his mind. We returned to the prison several hours later to speak with Watts. We told Watts we had additional questions regarding the events of August 13th. Watts agreed to answer additional questions, which are reflected above in the timeline provided by Watts. At the end of the interview, we thanked Watts for speaking to us and asked him if he would speak to us again in the future. Watts agreed. We asked Watts what he wanted to have happen with the information he provided us. Watts said he figured we would most likely tell Sandy, Frank, and Frankie about what he said to give them closure. Detective Baumhover said he wasn't sure what he would tell the Rusek family, and he had no intention on telling anyone what he said outside of law enforcement. Watts said he would appreciate being able to tell his parents about what had happened before they heard it anywhere else. Before the interview was concluded, I asked Watts if I could take a picture of him for the file. Watts agreed, and the 2 pictures I took are attached to this report. Nothing further. And the attachments here are Chris Watts' interview 1 and 2, and Chris Watts' picture, first one and second one. So that's the end of this report. I hope that was helpful for everyone, getting to hear a summary of this rather than listening to the entire interview. And I know certainly, again, the audio was a little difficult at times. I'm not going to give a lot of commentary here. I will say just a couple things. There's certainly truth in here, but I simply just don't believe anything really without evidence. There's no reason to. He hasn't earned that trust for anything for him to say to be taken at face value without evidence. I'm not saying that that doesn't mean some of it isn't true. It's just that's a choice that I've made. But certainly I'm sure there's things that are truth in there, especially things that maybe don't matter as much. But in terms of the details, the new information, maybe it happened that way, maybe it didn't. Perhaps the CBI is going to be able to corroborate some of his information. That would certainly be nice. Also, as we go through the discovery, perhaps we'll come across things that either corroborate some of this or not as well. Everyone should remember that there's 2 things we know for sure about Chris. 1, he's a liar, and 2, he's a murderer. So you keep that in mind. You want to believe certain things. He holds the power of the truth over this, and that's something that everyone seeks so much. So he actually has something that everyone is seeking, and there's power that comes with that. And so when you have people that want to believe the truth because you're the only one that knows the truth, you're able to say whatever you want. You're able to say truth, they'll want to believe it. You're able to say lies, and they want to believe it. And that's a power, and that's why I just don't trust him. And so that's a choice of mine. Everyone can make their own choice. So I hope you found this helpful. I appreciate the feedback to go through this, so I'm glad to be able to give it to you. But again, I was a little skeptical at first because, it's coming from the CBI, but certainly it's so much of it is coming from Chris, so I was a little hesitant to want to do it. But I think it's actually good to get out there, because then as we go back through the discovery, perhaps we'll come across things that you guys will catch that either corroborate or deny certain things that he said in here. In loving memory of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nichol, whole Rusek family, we pray for you. We ask God to strengthen you and help you, even despite this new information that may or may not be true. We just we ask for you to be able to know the truth and to find peace. This is the Diplomat. I hope you have a good day.